Yeah, let's bring in Sarah Huckabee Sanders. She's at the White House. A very big week, busy next few days. He's going to be all over the country. I think he has 11 rallies over the yesterday and into the midterms, right? I mean, it's just crazy.
It's crazy, the ability that the president has day in, day out, not just to bring these massive crowds out, but to actually deliver, and with the amount of energy and stamina that he has and that he's shown over the last month has been incredible and unprecedented. It's amazing the amount of time and energy that he has spent helping push Republicans over the line, and I think you're going to see that fruitful, particularly when it comes to the Senate. I think that the president has done an incredible job telling the story of these first 2 years of his administration and the number of successes that he has had, and I think you're going to see that on full display next week.
And so, Sarah, if we just looked at the map of the states the president's going to be visiting in the next 6 days. Are those states where the candidates are in trouble, or are those states where it's so close a visit by the president could push the Republican over the finish line?
Those are states where the president's incredibly popular and has the ability to help carry some of these individuals over the finish line. Certainly a great way to close is to have the president of the United States come in, talk about the booming economy, talk about securing the border, talk about defeating ISIS, talk about remaking the judiciary and the success that he's had as president, and how more Republicans help him get better policies in place. He has, again, a great contrast between Republicans and Democrats. You're going to see him lay that out, and I think it's going to be a huge difference maker next week.
You know, I'm just amazed at when the president brings up birthright citizenship. It was a story that Jonathan Swan had been following on Axios. So he brings it up. It becomes a big story. And to me, when you talk to constitutional attorneys like Jonathan Turley, he says this is a debate we need to have. But yet some people are interpreting this as some type of xenophobic, racist quest to change America. Are you surprised at how some are playing the president's would-be executive order?
I'm not at all surprised that the media and Democrats, which sometimes can be one and the same, would overplay their hand in the way that they're doing, whether it's on this issue or anything else that the president brings up. This is the party of no. This is the party of obstruction. They have no ideas. They have no policies. The reason we're in this position in the first place is because Democrats have failed to come to the table. They have failed to work with this president and pass legislation that helps protect our country, that helps protect the citizens of America, because they do not want to secure our borders. They do not want to have a law and order country. The reason that we're in this predicament is because Democrats in Congress have failed to do their job, and the president's going to look at any way possible that he can find legally and constitutionally to make sure that we're doing everything we can.
Will he be able to use an executive order? I know at first he said, I thought it was an act of Congress. Then I found out I could use executive order to make this to make sure that babies born here to illegals are not citizens. What are the facts here? Can he use executive order, or does he have to go through Congress?
There are a number of legal scholars who certainly think he can, but again, let's not forget why we're in this place and why we're even here at all, and that's because of the failure of Congress, Democrats in Congress, to actually do their job. And again, the president is going to take whatever powers he has to protect our borders and to protect our country.
Okay, so Congress has not been close on doing anything, but Sarah, you remember it was a number of months back where the president and Chuck Schumer, it sounded like they came real close to a deal where Chuck said, you know what, I'll give you the money for the wall, Mr. President, I just want the Dreamers to be able to stay here in the United States. And the president, it's, you know, according to the stories we've heard, said, you know what, I think I can get more. No. Was that a mistake not to take that deal at that point?
The president laid out, we need more than just one piece of the puzzle. The president wants to see a total reform take place. We have massive loopholes in our immigration system that we have to close, or we're just going to continue kicking the can down the road. The president's not somebody who wants to just keep passing the buck here. He wants to solve the problem. That's why he was elected, and that's why he's going to continue fighting to make sure he gets the job done.
What could you tell us about the communications with Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador, many of which citizens make up the caravan, and there's word now a third caravan is mobilizing this direction. Has there been some work talking to these leaders, along with trying to putting 5,200 troops on the border?
Certainly, we are in constant communication with other countries. Mexico has stepped up in an unprecedented way. We want to continue to be able to work with them. Hopefully, they'll continue
Sarah, how
to
have they
put
stepped
pressure
up? Everybody
on
got
these
through.
caravans.
But how have they stepped up? What did they do?
They have helped stop a lot of the transportation means of these individuals in these caravans, forcing them walking. They have helped us in new ways to slow this down, to break this up, and keep it from moving as aggressively towards the United States. Again, they can do more, but at the end of the day, the president is going to secure our border, and he's not going to let people that we don't know who they are, why they're coming, or what they're coming for into our country. There is a legal system, and we want people to come into this country, but we want them to do it in a legal way and in the process that exists. And we certainly want to fix that process so that it works better, so that more people can come here legally once they've gone through the system. But Democrats refuse to help us on that, and until they do, the president is going to do what it takes to secure our border.
The president said he was going to cut off aid to some of those countries that weren't cooperating or not stopping their citizens from working their way up to the United States. Has that happened?
Again, the president's looking at all options at his disposal to put not just influence on these countries, but also to break up these caravans and stop these people from illegally entering our country.
You know, over the last week, Sarah, we've had the news of the guy down in Florida who was sending out the bombs to prominent Democrats and over to CNN as well. And there was the horrible mass murder at the synagogue in Pennsylvania. There has been and since then, there have been a lot of people on television and elsewhere accusing the president of inflaming, raising the temperature, the political temperature, by his rhetoric. And I know you've been asked that question. What do you tell people who say the president is somewhat responsible for the tone of the political dialogue in the country right now?
Look, the only people that are responsible for these heinous acts are the people who carried them out. One of the things that we saw yesterday was the strength of our country. The community that we were in, that the president visited yesterday, of Pittsburgh, says far more about the United States of America than the two cowards that acted so outrageously over the last week. We saw that in the rabbi. We saw that in the bravery of the law enforcement. And we saw that in the strength of the community that came together. Yeah. That's who America is. We won't be defined by these two cowards, and we certainly won't have that blame placed on anyone other than those individuals.
And Sarah, can I just ask you a question about the synagogue survivors? I think the president met one yesterday and also talked with the widow of somebody who was murdered. Would it be okay if you told us what she told the president?
He did. He spent about an hour at the hospital with the widow of Dr. Godfrey yesterday, late evening yesterday. Congressman Rothfuss from Pennsylvania was with the president as well during that time. And she said that she wanted to be there in order to show him that people wanted him there. He spent a good bit of time with her and said he was very humbled and very saddened by the experience that he had yesterday in Pittsburgh.
When you look at the number of positive Republican stories, they're under 20%. With the Democratic stories, they're over 50%. According to an MRC study, the president famously has got 92% of the stories are negative to him. You're the press secretary. You see and you hear a lot of that. Do you believe that the networks are mobilized to stop the president and to stop the Republicans?
I certainly hope not, because that's not what our country is about. But I think ultimately when people go to the ballot box, they have a very clear decision. They can either vote for lower taxes, they can vote for secure borders, they can vote for the defeat of ISIS, they can vote for a president who stands for something and for a party who stands for something, or they can vote for open borders, they can vote for higher taxes, and they can vote for activist judges. There has never been a clearer contrast between two different groups of people, and the president is going to make that case, and you're going to see him do that over the next couple of days leading up until Tuesday. I don't think there's any better messenger for Republicans than this president, who's had an incredible success story, and I think you expect that to be on full display, and I think it'll turn out well on Tuesday.
All right, Sarah. Well, I hope you're wearing tennis shoes, because you're going to be running between now and next Wednesday.
I'll keep that in mind. I need that for chasing my kids for trick-or-treating tonight as well.
Good luck tonight with that. All right.
Thanks, Sarah.